They took some really great characters and sucked the life out of them. If you remove this entire scene, it won't change the story because it was added just for entertainment purposes and because it looked cool in a sad and tragic way.
And I think it's these small details the live adaptation seems to have overlooked that made the animation the great story that it is. The live adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender has been one of the most anticipated shows on Netflix. As a fan who grew up watching the Nickelodeon animation, I was excited when I heard about its production. But after watching this live adaptation by Netflix, my overall thoughts are that this show is a worthwhile production, but despite the evident effort put into it, there's something about it that leaves you feeling empty, disappointed, and quite disconnected from the story. I couldn't move past the thought that it was just okay. It wasn't bad, but it was just meh. And that is just wild considering the insanely rich source material that they had to work with. If you watch this because you loved the animation, you'll feel a great sense of nostalgia from a visual perspective. But beyond that, this show does not hold a candle to the original, nor does it do justice to that timeless story that connected with people so deeply, to the point where years later, it is still relevant. I was discussing this with a friend who is also a huge fan of the animation, and he told me he really enjoyed this live adaptation, and that's because he watched it without comparing it to the original source material. I thought about that for a while, trying to consider if I was being biased. Was I the problem and not this show? But after mulling it over, there is no way someone who has never heard of the previous content will watch this and find themselves deeply immersed in the story, caring about the character's journey and being filled with that feeling you always get when you watch something so good that you know it's gonna stick with you for a long time. That is because this live adaptation is a surface level production that looks cool but lacks any of the heart and soul. Over the years, it's not the movies and series that look cool that are immortalized. It's those that tell one heck of a story that stay in people's hearts and minds. For example, I have never watched any of the Star Wars movies, but I have seen certain clips of them here and there on the internet, and any Star Wars movie fan, don't come for me. It's just my opinion. It's not facts. It's just a subjective opinion. Anyway, they do not look that cool or interesting to watch, but the story in Star Wars continues to pass the test of time, and that is because you can tell a powerful story and not have powerful visuals, and it will still have a bigger impact than focusing on something that visually looks really appealing but has no depth or nuance to it. This Netflix adaptation did not get the memo on that. From an average viewer's perspective, like myself, they nailed it when it came to the visuals. But the writing in general was very shallow. It felt like they didn't consider how each story arc builds upon the other to create something that is cohesive and something that will build on the impact that it can have. I think this is one of those productions that garnered a lot of hype only because of the source material and not because of its own merit. And once that fizzles out, it will be forgotten, just like the movie that we never speak of. Just to be clear, this is nothing close to the tragedy that was the 2010 movie, but unless season 2 and 3 improve drastically when it comes to the writing, it will most likely end up forgotten or irrelevant, just like the 2010 movie. Before I go into why this was good and bad at the same time, let's summarize the story that is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar introduces us to a world of 4 nations, each connected to one earthly element: fire, water, earth, or air. The Fire Nation can manipulate fire. The Earth Kingdom can manipulate earth and rock in all its various forms. The Water Tribe can manipulate water and liquids in all their various forms. And lastly, the Air Nomads can manipulate air. The people in the Avatar world are divided among these 4 nations, but not everyone who belongs to any particular nation is able to manipulate the element connected to their nation. Those who can't are seen as regular human beings, while those who can are referred to as benders. So you can have a firebender, earthbender, airbender, or waterbender. The four nations have always coexisted peacefully, but that changed when the Fire Nation decided to attack. Their goal is to conquer all the other nations, and that is where the Avatar comes into the picture. The Avatar is the only person that can master all four elements, and his or her purpose in the Avatar world is to maintain peace and balance. Peace among all the four nations, and balance between all the four nations, and also balance between the earthly world in the Avatar world and the spirit world, which is another realm in the Avatar world. Once one avatar dies, another is reborn, and the cycle continues. In this version, we meet Avatar Aang, and he is the avatar that has to find a way to stop the war that the Fire Nation has started. Though he is capable of mastering all four elements, and that is what makes him the most powerful being in the Avatar world, the avatar isn't born knowing all the elements. Just like all the other benders, he or she has to train and master the elements. When Aang comes into the picture, the war has already been going on for 100 years, and defeating a highly skilled nation led by a genocidal tyrant leader won't be an easy task. To help him with this mission, Aang meets Katara and Sokka, who are siblings from the Water Tribe. Katara is a waterbender, while Sokka is a regular human being who is also highly intelligent, and he is also a skilled inventor with a quirky personality. The three journey to various places in the Avatar universe to find Aang masters who can train him so that he can learn to master all the four elements. Along the way, they form a great bond of friendship, and the trio become the center of the story. Now, onto the original Avatar versus the Netflix adaptation. In recent times, taking beloved and timeless animations and turning them into live adaptations has become Hollywood's favorite thing, so it's not a surprise that Netflix decided to pick one of the most popular animations and do their own version of it. The original Avatar is an animation that first aired on Nickelodeon in 2005. With a total of 3 seasons, the show remained part of Nickelodeon's viewing content till July. 19 years later, the story is still highly relevant and very popular, and that is a testament to how timeless this masterpiece is. The latest adaptation on Netflix only has 1 season, but Netflix has confirmed that season 2 and 3 will go into production. In the original, season 1 and 2 have a total of 20 episodes each, while season 3 has 21 episodes. Each episode runs for about 25 minutes, and in total, season 1 has a running time of about 454 minutes. That is around 7 hours and 34 minutes. The Netflix adaptation only has 1 season out, and it runs for about 382 minutes. That is around 6 hours and 22 minutes. It has a total of 8 episodes, with the longest episode being 63 minutes, while the shortest one is 47 minutes. This makes the live adaptation shorter than the original by 1 hour 12 minutes. We're going to review episode 1, examining the scenes that they chose to include from a critical perspective. For anyone watching this and they have not watched the show, this is your spoiler warning. If you choose to continue, get ready to be spoiled. Let's begin with episode 1, shall we? Episode 1 starts with an earthbender infiltrating the Fire Nation. He's trying to get a scroll that has information about an attack on the Earth Kingdom by the Fire Nation. The guy succeeds in passing on the information to his partner in crime, but he's not able to escape. Instead, he gets captured. He is taken to the Fire Lord, who at the time is Fire Lord Sozin. Sozin is Zuko and Azuna's great-grandfather and General Iroh and Ozai's grandfather. I do not think it's mentioned in this live adaptation, but in the animation we know that Sozin is best friends with Avatar Roku. That is before he betrayed Roku and left him to die. After Roku's death, he's the one that instigated the war that continues to be carried on by his successors. Aang is then the immediate Avatar that was reborn after Roku's death. Live adaptations are always hard to pull off because they have to appeal to an already existing fan base with high expectations. And they also have to bring out something new to an already existing successful story. With Avatar, there were a lot of rumors on social media about what this show will be. One of those was a comment by the showrunner mentioning that in addition to the existing fan base, they would also like to capture fans of the Game of Thrones series. We do see this reflected in how they decided to do this live adaptation of Avatar. For instance, the lightweight and comedic aspects of the animation have been replaced with some dark and serious scenes. For example, the scene of our Lord Sozin actually burning a person alive. During that scene, it also reveals that Sozin plans to massacre the Air Nomads in the hopes that he will kill the next Avatar if he annihilates an entire nation. It's actually nice that they switched things up to include more mature themes, and they did so while maintaining a level of familiarity that still appeals to original fans. After that, we move away from the Fire Nation and into the well-known opening sequence of Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is where all 4 elements of bending are showcased, as the narration gives you a backstory of how the 100-year-old war started. Instead of Katara doing the narration, in this version, Avatar Kyoshi is the one that narrates the opening sequence. Why did they change it to her? It's not clear even as the story continues. And why did they pick the avatar that was most prone or maybe easily inclined to violence? We also don't know. Maybe this quality is more complementary to appealing to a Game of Thrones fan. But as I was saying, in the original, Katara narrates the opening sequence, and as you watch the show, you begin to realize that that was intentional and that was for a specific reason. And the reason is Katara is the glue that keeps Team Avatar together. Her nurturing and empathetic nature, paired with her strength and skills as a waterbender, always came in handy in crucial times. She is also the one person that anchors Aang to the physical world. Whenever Aang lost control and triggered the Avatar state, Katara was always the one that was able to bring him back. In that sense, she is also the person that anchors the story. If she chose to leave Team Avatar, Sokka would follow her, and that meant that Aang would be left alone to figure out how to become a master at all the bending elements and fight the Fire Lord by himself, which means the story would have been something completely different from what Avatar: The Last Airbender is. In addition to that, she is not only Aang's closest friend and later on romantic partner, she is also the waterbending master that trains Aang to master water as an element. It clearly wasn't a random choice, but something done by design, for Katara to be the only one that narrates the opening sequence throughout all the seasons. As for Avatar Kyoshi, I haven't deciphered if there was a deeper meaning to having her narrate the opening sequence. It just seems like a random choice that was made to switch things up. And that is where the problem lies in this live adaptation. If you see the original, you'll notice that there are small details in each episode that add up to form a bigger picture and a cohesive story with cohesive themes. And I think it's these small details the live adaptation seems to have overlooked that made the animation the great story that it is. Anyway, after that opening sequence, we are introduced to the Air Nomads, their way of life, and Aang gliding around. I gather that this scene was meant to set Aang apart because the other Air Nomads seem impressed. But I found that to be a little bit odd because Aang is just doing simple stuff that every air nomad there who has airbending abilities should be able to do. So why everyone was looking so mesmerized was beyond me. The airbending skills that Aang is showcasing in this scene should be like the basics, the bare minimum that literally everyone with airbending abilities can do, and there even should be more people in the air doing something, like for example more kids alongside Aang doing something, gliding around. Anyway, that was that, and it wasn't a big thing that destroyed the entire story, so I digress. I have to say, one of the things that I love about this series is the visual representation in terms of costume design. I think they nailed it in bringing the costumes in the animation to life. I also love the casting of the actors, and can anybody really hit the set design because it looked amazing everywhere, every single time. I like that the actors closely resemble the animated characters. I like that everything just seemed so vibrant and it was just always beautiful to see. And in general, it did a great job of bringing back nostalgic feelings, especially for the people that grew up watching this show. This scene with the Air Nomads focuses on establishing Aang's bond with Monk Gyatso by showing how their relationship evolved from guardian and mentor into great friends. At this point, Sozin's plans are already known, and though he's still a child, the monks decide to tell Aang that he is the Avatar. So therefore, he needs to leave his home and go find masters that will train him in the other elements so that he can defeat Sozin. Aang doesn't want to leave the only home he's ever known, and he feels very conflicted, so he decides to take Appa and go on a little trip. I liked this scene because it helps to establish Aang as a simple human boy
before he went on to become the most powerful person in the Avatar world.
I wish there were more scenes like this to keep us connected to what Aang lost, and also to keep us connected to who he was before he lost everything and before the Fire Nation decided to attack. But this is the only episode that showed us Aang's life before he learned he was the Avatar.
In the animation, we see Aang's past in different episodes, each revealing something about his character and his life before the Fire Nation attack. We see him playing that game that looks similar to Quidditch in Harry Potter. The game does have a name and it is not Quidditch. I just cannot remember it for the life of me. We see him playfully throwing pies at the monks, plus a bunch of other scenes that are placed in different episodes to reveal an aspect of his character, like his playfulness, his skill, his caring nature, how he always found it difficult to be an outcast or an outsider because he was the Avatar. I think the spacing out of these moments creates a better flow of the story, and it would have done the same for this live adaptation. Back to the story, this is when the Fire Nation attacks and kills all the air nomads. I suppose this scene was meant to make us feel emotional as the audience, but it didn't do anything for me. Not because watching an entire nation getting wiped out isn't sad, but because I think from a storytelling perspective, it came too soon, and there wasn't enough build-up for all this to hit home. On the other hand, when the truth about the genocide was revealed in the animation, I felt deeply for Aang and all those affected. In the animation, we do not see the genocide as it happens. Instead, Aang discovers the skeleton of Monk Gyatso at the air temple, which then leads to a devastating realization of what happened. This approach has a bigger impact because we had time to get to know Aang, to understand who he is as a character, to understand the kind of things that he values, which by extension helped us to understand the kind of people that raised him and the kind of home that he grew up in. Seeing this innocent, naive kid have to deal with the destruction of everything he ever knew was intense. Having already grown fond of Aang and familiar with the Avatar world, his discovery was more profound than actually seeing the genocide as it happened. But the main reason I think this didn't work is that if you can remove an entire scene from a story and it doesn't affect anything or how the story progresses, it doesn't affect any of the characters, that's how you know that that scene was unnecessary. The genocide of the air nomads was specifically connected to Aang. He is the one character in this story that would be deeply affected, and the genocide served the purpose of changing Aang from this sheltered kid into a person that now realizes the gravity of the situation. If you remove this entire scene, it won't change the story because it was added just for entertainment purposes and because it looked cool in a sad and tragic way. You didn't need to see the genocide actually happening in order to feel for Aang and the other characters in the Avatar world. And we also didn't need to see it because it does nothing to push the story forward. You don't have to actually see something in order to feel deeply for the people affected. Seeing Aang discover the skeleton of the one person who was like a father to him, a guardian, mentor, and friend, was enough to grasp the kind of pain that Aang was in, and also enough to understand the gravity of the situation. I don't hate this scene, but I think it would have had more of an impact if it pushed the story forward or if it pushed a character's arc forward. Because it doesn't do any of that, it doesn't carry any of the emotional weight that a scene like this would have. So Sozin wipes out all the air nomads except for Aang, who had taken a ride with Appa. On his way, Aang gets caught up in a storm and he ends up activating the Avatar state in order to save his life and Appa's life. After that, we have a huge time jump and we are taken to the present where we meet Katara and Sokka, who are from the Water Tribe. Sozin was the one who started the war, and that was 100 years ago. So I found it kind of odd that visually there was nothing that signified the huge time jump. Even when you go back to the Fire Nation, it all looks the same. You would think there would be more developments, more infrastructure to signify the time shift. But I digress. Focusing on Sokka and Katara, this is where the two of them discover Aang, and this is also where, as the audience, we are introduced to the two other main characters in the story. They took some really great characters and sucked the life out of them. Katara, for one, had so much to her, and here they stripped her of everything that gave her a personality and everything that made her feel human. They took everything that made her relatable and essentially just turned her into a weapon, and that was it. There is nothing wrong with that, but it can't be all that you are, because that quickly turns into something that is not relatable and honestly something that is boring. When I finished watching this series, I had completely forgotten about Katara. It was only in deciding to do this video that I remembered that Katara was and is an unforgettable character in Avatar. Yet here she was painfully so passive, dull and boring that I completely forgot that she was an important character. And Sokka. In the animation, Sokka was initially a sexist person. These two lost their mom to the Fire Nation, and then afterwards their dad left along with all the other men in the Water Tribe to go fight the Fire Nation. They were kids and they had to figure it out all on their own. Sokka wanted to be a great leader just like his father, and Katara wanted to be able to be freely and proudly who she was, and that is a waterbender. But of course both of them struggled with that. Because Sokka wanted to emulate his dad, it's through Sokka's sexism that we understand that you can have biases within your own way of life and be blind to them. Sokka wants to emulate the ideals of the men in the Water Tribe, especially his father. In Sokka's pursuit to emulate his own dad, we see the toxicity of certain gender norms prevalent in the Water Tribe. While Sokka and the Water Tribe in general are portrayed as the good guys in the story, his journey highlights how groups of people often follow specific ways of life which make sense to them. They may not make sense to outsiders, but they definitely make sense to them. For example, it seemed logical for the Water Tribe to overlook the combat potential of the women simply because of their gender, and this was despite the fact that waterbending has nothing to do with physical strength. It has everything to do with skills, so it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. If you're skilled, you can be a powerful waterbender. I mean, case in point, by the end of the story, we know the most powerful waterbender is Katara. Another powerful waterbender that I do not think is shown in this series, but one that was still powerful nonetheless, was Hama. And both of them are female. In the same way, as the story continues, we come to understand that the Fire Nation also has its own perspective on life, and this way of life makes sense to them. The Fire Nation does not see themselves as the enemy, instead they see themselves as the savior. And when you see this from their point of view, you understand how it makes sense for so many of the citizens to aid the Fire Lords in whatever the Fire Lords want to do to other tribes. Seeing this in two different nations helps you understand that everyone sees themselves as the hero in their own story, and they might not be able to see their own faults. It's these realizations that help the characters to understand and even befriend some people from the Fire Nation. This is why Sokka's struggle with sexism was so important. It provided Sokka and other characters with valuable lessons that facilitated their growth. And as viewers, we also gain insight into these complex issues. Netflix decided to they decided to completely remove Sokka's sexism because I guess sexism has no place in the real world. And you know what? It would have been okay if they removed this aspect of Sokka and replaced it with an equally substantial storyline. But instead, they took out Sokka's sexism and replaced it with absolutely nothing. And I think I read an article that mentioned that was because they didn't want to include things that would be sensitive in today's world or offensive to the viewers. But here's the thing. There is a significant difference between depicting something and condoning something. Even though Sokka displayed sexist attitudes in the original series, it was very clear that this was something that was not being endorsed by the series. I love Sokka as a character, and I think his possession of such a toxic trait made him more compelling and enriched the story. Fictional stories are creations of the writers, but they mirror life to great extents. And in real life, sexism exists, and that is why it was okay for Sokka to have faults that held serious weight. Negative traits are often attributed to the villain in the story, but having this annoyingly lovable guy who genuinely has good intentions be so blind to the fact that he holds such negative and toxic beliefs was interesting to see. Sexist individuals do exist in real life, and they often have families, friends, and other loved ones who care for them. They may not even realize that their worldview is detrimental even to the people that are closest to them. You can automatically decide that you have nothing in common with a villain, but a good character like Sokka makes it way easier to reflect things back to you and make you think about how you view the world. As a kids show, I think the original did an amazing job at highlighting this and teaching you that you can be blind to negative traits that you possess, but once you recognize them, you can always do better. That was a substantial storyline, and it was so disappointing to see them remove it and replace it with nothing. Back to Katara and Sokka discovering Aang. They find Aang and take him back to their village. This part was one of the sections that was so painful to watch. We meet Gran Gran, who is Katara and Sokka's grandmother. And in every scene she's in, she's always giving some expository dialogue about what is going on. I honestly believe that you could ask her where the bathroom is, and instead of pointing you there or just telling you to the right or to the left, like any normal human being would, she'll start telling you things like how bathrooms were invented, why they were invented, when they were invented, who invented them, the materials that were used. You could go on and on. It's a very unnatural way of communicating, and it's weird. Every time she started speaking, I was thinking of two things. Who asked you all this? And just answer the question.
Just answer the question, okay? Please don't play with me right now. Just, no, that's it, please.
It was very cringe and annoying to watch, and it was also insulting to the audience. It's like the writers didn't trust that we were smart enough to decipher what was happening without it being told in long, exhausting, expository dialogue. So they decided to give Gran Gran the worst script and have her mansplain everything to us. This did such a disservice to the story, because if you are at that point in time immersed in the Avatar world, it takes you out of it once Gran Gran starts going into expository dialogue. After we move on from what is not the last of Gran Gran's tragic script, Katara tells Aang about the Fire Nation and what they did to her family. This is all part of the story, so it's okay, except for the fact that the Water Tribe is said to be barely making ends meet after the Fire Nation attacked them. And yet, here they are dressed in clothes that look so new and so vibrant. All their outfits look like they were straight out of the box, and it looked like it was day one of them wearing them. While Katara and Aang are hanging out, Zuko, the banished prince and the villain in this part of the story, makes his way to the village. Zuko is Fire Lord Ozai's son, and Ozai is the current genocidal dictator of the Fire Nation. He was banished by his own father for speaking up against the injustice that existed within the Fire Nation against its own people. For him to be allowed home, gain back his crown and his father's acceptance, he needs to capture the Avatar and deliver him to the Fire Nation. They took out a lot of the humor and the somehow lightweight moments of this show, so it was nice to see that some of it was kept in. For example, Zuko invading the Water Tribe, and the kids holding up rocks to defend themselves against an army of trained soldiers. At first, Sokka wants to give Aang to Zuko, but Katara convinces him not to. But Zuko attacks, and that forces Aang to hand himself over so that no one gets hurt. What happens after this I found to be a bit odd, but it's also in the animation. Iroh, who is the current Fire Lord's brother, visits Aang in his prison cell, and their conversation is so relaxed, it's as if it's between two friends. Personally, I think if the goal was to give this live adaptation a more mature tone, scenes like these could have been omitted, instead of cutting out the scenes that showed us the funny and playful personalities of the characters. At this point, Katara and Sokka decide to go and rescue Aang. While this is happening, Aang also finds a way out of his cell. He stumbles into Zuko's room, where he finds a book that has information about all the previous avatars. This becomes how Aang learns about his past lives, as opposed to being able to go into the avatar state at will and connect to whichever past life he wants. The rescued Aang, Katara manages to counterattack Zuko's bending, and they fly away to the air temple that Aang grew up in. This is where Aang finally discovers Monk Gyatso's skeleton, which makes him realize the severity of the situation and also proves that there was no point of actually showing the genocide itself. I think it would have made sense if they wanted to show it, Aang shows up, tries to fight off the Fire Nation, but he fails and instead runs away. They could have used that time to show us more of the characters' personalities. Seeing this triggers the Avatar state in Aang, and if he doesn't find a way to gain control, he might destroy what's left of the Air Temple and also kill his friends Katara and Sokka. In this version, it's not Katara that pulls Aang out of the Avatar state. Instead, it's the memories that Aang has with Monk Gyatso. Finally, this episode ends with Aang determined to master all the elements and find a way to defeat the Fire Nation. I'll admit this adaptation succeeds in many aspects, but it falls short in its writing, and I think that is what will make this show easily forgettable, unlike the original, which remains relevant years later. The heart of Avatar lies in its story and the characters' journey, which shape their personalities and makes it so easy to care about them and to also root for them. Stripping away a lot of these elements and failing to replace them with meaningful content, all in the name of appealing to the current audience or perhaps not wanting to offend anyone, resulted in a mediocre story. We know the original writers were initially part of the creative team, but they decided to leave due to creative differences. I can't help but wonder what they would have created, and it's kinda sad that we'll never get to see their vision come to life. I'm still a huge fan of Avatar, so I do hope that season 2 improves in terms of its writing. But if you're wondering which one is better, the animation remains unmatched. And with that, that is the end of this video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and leave me a comment below.